Okay, hello everyone. This is the US of A, USA, HSC video. Fuck, you can't even see. Okay, the US of A, the USA. This is for the HSC, USA. Shut up. Okay, so basically, we got three mad cunts, and we're gonna delve into the politics of the 1920s in the US of A. There was Republican dominance of these three fucks. There was Warren Harding, not really relevant. Then there was Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover. These fuckers, these two cunts, they favoured big business, limited government involvement, and supported high tariffs, which was rapid industrialism. Not very smart, is it now? Stuff that happened in the 1920s. There was the jazz age, you know? Everyone was kind of going out to clubs and doing the flap. There was the KKK, some racism rampant. Nothing really changes in America, I guess. Women got the vote. Prohibition, that would never fucking happen in Australia. No alcohol, are you fucking shitting? The Scopes trial. I mean, I can't wait for another one of these in America soon. The Scopes trial, it was basically this teacher was charged for non-traditional values in school, where he basically taught kids about evolution. Ned Flanders would be pretty pissed, wouldn't he? There were new innovations, Ford cars. Things were just starting to like really work properly, weren't they? I mean, we're just kind of in the dark before. Prosperity was not overall. There were some people who were pretty broke as shit. Okay, then we got Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Early life. Do we really give a shit? No, we don't. I doubt it's going to be relevant in the exam. But anyway, born in New York, wealthy family, graduate of Harvard with an AB in history, courage through adversity. He considered himself a progressive after he caught the polio, and that basically turned him into, you know, not being so much of a prick. And then he was like, oh, yeah, I guess poor people suffer like how I suffer with polio. And then this baddie bitch, yeah, he basically worked his way up, married his distant cousin, but worked his way up into governor of New York, which brings us to here. As governor of New York, he spent, you know what, I'm just gonna rip it off. Okay, I ripped it. He was a progressive. Spent his time on the sidelines, out of politics, resting during the 1920s because of his polio. Also, can we just talk about how fine he is? Fuck me, young FDR, Jesus. You'd have a great time on TikTok, mate. Yeah, until his party's fortune improved in 1928, the Democrats. As the Democratic presidential candidate that year was Al Smith, asked Roosevelt to run for office of New York governor, and he won. This lad laid the foundation for his run as president in 1932. Despite the landslide victory of the Republicans, Herbert Hoover in the presidential race that year, Democratic Roosevelt scraped into the governor's mansion in New York by a thin margin of 6%. Sometimes it's all you fucking need. Roosevelt displayed astonishing vigor during his campaign despite his health concerns. He may have been a poor old sick bastard, but my god, could he still get it on with the ladies and move a few and try to get some rights for his people and get them out of the depression. In New York, Roosevelt acted fast as he could with his people, compensating them and making them comfortable in his state. He created the first state agency in the US to provide unemployment relief and fund New York for the jobless, the Temporary Relief Administration, TERA. T-E-R-A. Yeah, I watched Terrifier last night so I wouldn't fall asleep because I was studying. Fuck me, that shit's horrendous. Roosevelt became convinced that government could do more to help its people and subside its suffering. Roosevelt's success in New York made him the natural Democratic candidate for 1932 in the presidential election. We'd hope so. His presidency. Jesus, would you look at my notes? Absolutely fucking stone. Alright, FDR's presidency through the TGD, the Great Depression. Focused on the relief and recovery of the American people. One of his major beliefs was that the government could be doing more to help its citizens. Wish someone fucking told ScoMo that. And I wish someone told fucking the other prick. Who's it now? Tony Abbott? No, fuck, what's his name? Albo. Scumbucket. Democratic Party, presidential term. He's the only president to have served 3 terms. And the last, because there's a new law. Because, once he did it, they were all like, nah, can't outdo him. He's the main guy. FDR in New York. Oh, we already fucking went over that. What he did, he set up the first agency in FERA, unemployment relief, working programs for the jobless, new acts and protection laws in banking, farming, and workers. This was called the New Deal, which he implemented. Note, although the New Deal did not end the Great Depression, it did ease the suffering and provide temporary relief before, the big boom of money that came in. Money of the World War II once they entered. The Great Depression. People are pretty depressed over there. Poor Love selling her kids. Shut up. Alright, the Great Depression, the Wall Street crash of 1929. This was due to fake stock info, loans, global. Another thing that's happening during the Great Depression, which is touched upon in Doctor Who, and that's the only reason why I fucking know it, was Hooverville, which was basically in Centennial Park, a bunch of homeless people, which was, pretty much majority of the USA then, were just camping out in the park because they didn't have a place to fucking live. And Herbert Hoover was just like, local government can take care of it. Here's a quote by FDR. I see 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-led, ill-nourished. That's pretty true. Unemployment by 1932 hit 32%. Jesus, but that's horrendous. Aid must be extended by the government as a matter of charity, not as a matter of charity, but as a matter of social duty. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This chick, Katie, this is a secondary source, doesn't matter. She just said, it seemed one nation was standing on one long bread line. Banks shut down, farmers overproduced, inflation, lost jobs, a national economic crash leaving Americans destitute. They were all just fucking on the dole, but there wasn't really a dole, Where's Centrelink? He's about to come into that. The New Deal. We have the New Deal, in which he added in some acts and some laws and some programs that really help people out in agriculture, the banks, the workers. Didn't do so much for women or, black people, but, take what you can get. He provided relief for the few. A deeply felt commitment to improving the lives of ordinary Americans who endured the stress in the wake of the Great Depression. Alan Allport, 2003, book on Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Right, the New Deal. Banks. Emergency banking law. This meant a bank holiday. That's why we have them. A bank holiday. All sound banks could reopen after a few days. Soon, all banks reopened. Money, money, money! And there was a bank conservator appointed. which means that they couldn't be doing any more naughty trading, unfortunately. Truth and Securities, honest exchange of stock info. Securities Exchange needed a license in stock exchange. Glass-Steagall Banking Act. This basically meant that banks couldn't participate in stock exchange anymore. They must be shitting themselves now, innit? Here's another quote by Frankie Boy. He said, "It is safer to keep your money in a reopened bank than it is under a mattress." I can attest to that, but not right now. The workers, the ordinary blokes. Basically, he did this program called the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCCC, which unemployed men were employed into infrastructure and environmental work, killing two birds with one stone, you know, labour, and people needed money to feed their kids and get money for processes. They had $30 a month. Abolishment of child workers, higher wages, government recognised rights for workers to union organise, federal relief pushback. So basically, FDR tried to set up, relief agencies called FERA in each state, but there was pushback because people thought that the Great Depression was the individual's fault because they were lazy and couldn't get a job. Nothing changes. Again, some of these programs, I haven't even gotten onto the farmers yet, but some of these programs would fall through because the High Court would, get rid of them because Chief Justice Hughes said the Constitution does not change by the ebb and flow of the economics. The farmers, the real backbone of society. AAA, no, not Alcohol Anonymous, but AAA, Agriculture Adjustment Act. This meant that they would reward farmers for reducing output of staple products, dealing with overproduction, because everyone's prices were low, but no one could get anything because there was just so much crap being produced. Kind of like Marvel movies now. Farmers Credit Act, loans for farmers. Emergency Farm Mortgage Act, loans for farm mortgages. Pretty self-explanatory. Then there was some dumb shit where FDR tried to play God and he thought that he could control the weather or some shit. Yeah, he tried to introduce some programs where he could control the Great Dust Bowl. Basically, the Great Dust Bowl was a massive drought, and the farmers were kind of fucked in that period of time because they couldn't grow shit. But FDR was like, "Oh, if you just do farming a certain way, surely it'll fix it, right?" But no, that's not how it works. We aren't in fucking Wizard of Oz land of Oz. So yeah, he tried to control God's will, as people would say. Foreign policy. Let's switch sides. Yay! Naval activity. I would just like to preference the same by the fact that I'm pretty sure that I cooked in this pot. Totally cooked. Oh, what the fuck? Get out of here. Alright. Foreign policy. Was America isolated or was it not? I'd argue it... Excuse me. I'd argue that it most certainly was not isolated, and in fact was very involved in political affairs and, just war affairs. So, here we have some foreign policy. He said, and I quote, "Your boys will not be sent into any foreign war." Except they were. The Lend-Lease Act, providing military aid to allies. America participated in global trade. The Good Neighbor policy. Here's a non-one. Non-intervention with Latin America. The US of A did not join the League of Nations, however, they did attend global meetings. Limited, yet still letting in 2% of immigrants. So they weren't really isolated, were they? Alright, now we get to the good shit. Naval activity. So, basically, FDR was being kind of fucking sneaky, and he was saying that he wasn't involved in the war while it was roaming rampant. But in fact he was, and the secrets lie in the naval activity. I know this sounds like a conspiracy, but just fucking bear with. So, my source comes from the book Samuel Eliot Morison from 1947, and US Naval Operations book. So basically, there were US naval ships. Okay, so basically, in the Atlantic Ocean, there was a border, and well before the US of A officially entered the war, they were participating in naval activity. This involved US naval ships escorting Okay, we're back. I've tried to draw it. Okay, so basically, before they officially entered the war, the US was escorting Allied ships across the border, and they said that they were neutral, but in actuality, the US ships would attack Nazi ships, even though they said that they were neutral. And, you know, before Hitler was hopped up on meth, he actually had a kind of smart decision here where he decided to withdraw his ships because he knew that the Americans were trying to enter the war, which they were. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt lied to the American people, saying that they weren't involved, and tried to cover up this shit by saying that it was a breach of the Neutrality Acts. And so then the USA sank the Bismarck German battleship. And well, that's what made Hitler fuck off. After that, or before that, France fell, right? And Japan moved into occupied Indochina, pushing the French out. And, well, the US wanted to get involved in the war because they needed money, and they also wanted the Japanese to fuck off. So, and you know, the US was kind of giving Japan exports of oil and other, you know, scrap essentials and stuff. Mainly oil, though. So then what they did was they put sanctions. The USA put sanctions on Japan, and that meant that Japan were pretty fucked, really, and they were cornered, and the US of A, they knew that Japan couldn't last 6 months without the US import of oil, meaning that Japan was fucked and they had no option to enter the war. Japan was forced to attack in Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December. The bombing of Pearl Harbor meant successful entry for the US of A into World War II. And England and the Dutch also followed suit in the US of A's example to stop the exports to Japan. I mean, the Japan people that were occupied in Indochina. That's what I mean by it. So yeah, everyone was kind of stopped giving them stuff. So that meant that, you know, Japan had no choice other than to, you know, attack. And that's what Pearl Harbor is, basically. And then the Japanese, well, they tried to, you know, talk to the US of A, and they were like, look, mate, I'll negotiate with you. I'll pull out of Indochina. But the US was like, you're not only gonna pull out of Indochina, you're also gonna pull out of China as well. So the US doubled down, telling them to pull out. And, you know, Churchill, this is exemplified in Churchill's book, The Second World War, where, you know, Winston Churchill, he really needed the US to come into the war because they were going to be a powerful ally for him, and he didn't mind risking the Japanese entering the war because Japan, yes, it was powerful, but it was less so, and having the US of A was pretty damn good, I've got to say. So he needed a powerful ally, and then the US industrial capacity. Winston Churchill needed the US like capacity for industrial and work and the army. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention, you know, when the US was still lying and they haven't officially entered the war, they were doing this shit with the Allies called a cash and carry, where the US would provide the Allied ships with arms if they carried cash, so it was, you know, off the books. Then the US, you know, joined the army, and everyone kind of joined the army while this whole lying was going on. I mean, look at this fucking paper trail. So World War II. Here's some bullshit quote from FDR. Let the strong help the weak to survive. So yeah, basically FDR really wanted to enter the war because it meant like increased production, government spending went up, global trade, loans, workforce expansion. Ken Webb, Top G, 2018 source, he says, it took the expansion of production and money back from loaning by World War II to fully restore employment and stabilize the country. So that's foreign policy of the naval activity. And there you have it. No sleep.